Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Desteni I Process Live Google Hangout. I am Christina and I am your host for this week's next Hangout in the series we have been walking on these DIP Hangouts, which have been on practical self-empowerment. Tonight my guest is Joe Koo, and he's going to share with us a time in his life that he described as a darker time, and he's going to share with us what was going on in his life and how he was able to practically support himself, to empower himself, and to rebuild basically from a world he described as collapsing. So hi, Joe. Thank you for being here.
It's hard to follow up with that. Wow. I feel a little. Yes. Hello, everybody. I am here.
You are here. Before you get into it, Joe, I'm just going to let everyone know that they can definitely participate in the conversation if they have questions or if they have comments or perspective to share. Please do so. We have the Q&A on the Google Plus app from the Google Plus page. If you're watching from the YouTube link, just click on be part of the discussion or be part of the conversation. I'm not sure what it says, but click that and it will take you to the Google Plus app where you can participate. We will be discussing for about 40 minutes, so just get your questions in that time. So yeah, Joe, why don't you just give us, just basically set the stage for us. You had mentioned it was about 3 years ago. You kind of found things kind of collapsing for you. Just tell us, where were you at in your life? What was happening? What kind of brought you to that point? Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and let us know what happened.
Okay, so this was roughly 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago now. I was at a point where I was coming out of a relationship and I was moved from the city I was living in back to California. And the thing with that was I had no job waiting for me. I had no money. I was in debt. I had to borrow money to make the move. And it was a time where I was actually living, I was actually living with my mother and my sister. And we were living together in one room. And this was a room that was actually a converted garage. So it was somewhat spacious. It was a single room, no walls. There was no privacy. And that's where we lived. And at the time, it was rough because I was coming from I had a job, I had a relationship, I kind of had an idea of who I was, where I was going, and having somewhat of a normal life, I suppose. Coming out of that and landing in a situation where everything was different. I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do, just having no privacy, just cramped in one little room. It was rough, and a part of me really felt like that was rock bottom. That's it. I had fallen to the lowest point of my life, and I was ready to just give up because it felt like it would have made sense to just accept it, right? To just go, all right, that's it. This is the end of the road. I might as well get used to this. And that didn't do me any favors, but I was in such a mood within myself where I allowed that to be my experience. And it took me a while, but I was able to start a job, and I realized that where I was living and going on in my life, yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't very healthy. It wasn't very supportive, but physically I'm still here. I'm still alive. And no matter how badly I felt, every day, unconditionally, I still woke up in a bed and my physical body was still here. And nothing had changed because I wasn't changing anything. I was still stuck in how I was feeling and how depressed I was and how badly I wanted things to be like they were before. But I wasn't looking at why did those things not work out either? Who was I within all of that? So I began working as a salesperson. I was able to, get myself a job through a mutual friend. between my mother had known somebody, and her daughter was able to get me a position at a retail store. And I started working as a sales, and I hated that job, because it was me having to deal, my not having any privacy when I got home, and work stress, and I was still in debt, and I was still, kind of processing everything, and every day just felt so grueling. And that really was the darkest period of my life, the darkest moment of my process, where it really felt like everything of me had just broken, and everything that was here was, going to this job, hating it, and not making that much money, and not really having a place to live, and dealing with stress at home, and not having a place to vent. And all of that led me to realize, well, I have to support myself, and I have to basically go back to basics, um, back to breathing, back to realizing that everything I'm experiencing is based on energy that I'm allowing through my thoughts, through my emotions, through participating in it. Going back to listening to the interviews on eQuaf, going back to doing my writing and my self-forgiveness. And in a way, it was cool because it forced me to really have to apply it live instead of having a more theoretical understanding of it. I really had to push. And when I was at work and a customer is in my face and I have to argue and haggle with them to feel, as much as I wanted to just right then and there say, you know what, it's not worth it, I quit, I'm done, and would walk out and temper tantrum, I would always be able to just slow down and realize that because I have the tools, I can support out of this. And in this moment, I can breathe through it because I've done it before. I've written out this point, and I don't have to be a victim to energy, all those thoughts. And day by day, what started happening was I became better and better at my job. I started as a person and really not liking the environment and what I had to do, and some of the more morally conflictual things I was done inside me, where I felt like my business was dishonest and I wasn't doing anything that was contributing to society, and I'm not getting paid that much, and I'm having to do all these things just to get a paycheck. But within that, I began to develop skills, and it came with just showing up every day, going and facing the day unconditionally, knowing that, yes, I'm going to go home. There's not going to be privacy. There's nowhere for me to hide. My life right now is wake up, go to work, come back, relax as much as I can, work on myself, and go back the next day and do a better job. Because eventually I decided this wasn't the life that I was going to keep living. I decided that I wasn't going to let myself just stop here. I couldn't. There was no way I was going to keep spiraling down that way. And the only way out was to, show up every day and do the work. And over time, what happened was, like I said, I developed skills. I became a specialist in certain things I was able to handle for the company. And the more I focused on that and didn't pay as much attention to all the things where, I'm not really good with sales, I'm not really comfortable speaking Chinese with these Chinese customers, and I don't really want to deal with this and this. Instead of focusing on all of the things I didn't like, I focused on the best job I could do with what I was good at. And I became noticed for that throughout my company. People started to hear my name, and I would be given more responsibility. I was handling more and more complex cases for our company's accounts. And instead of being a salesperson, I moved up to becoming an office manager. And over the course of a year, it was interesting because when I began this job, there were so many things I disagreed with and hated how the company worked. But over time, as I became more trusted, as I showed the ability to do the work and understand why things are done a certain way instead of judging it and being like antagonistic about it, I was able to become more and more of a manager within the company. I started interviewing people, hiring my own staff, and I was given my own office. And over time, surprisingly, I was in a position of being able to change our policies, to do things in a better way that was less stressful for everybody, that was more honest. And that couldn't have happened if I stayed in the mentality that I was in when I was at my lowest point. So to compare who I am now, what I've walked through, what I've become, to who I was back when I was living with my mother and sister in one little room, it really is like two different people. And I was able to do this because of knowing the tools of Desteni, knowing the tools of how to support myself, how to keep at it and not give up, and understand there is no giving up. And I would leave it at, that moment when you start letting go of hoping, letting go of waiting and judging and shame. And the more you can let go of that, the more you actually become empowered to change. And for me, it was a process. I mean, it took years, but to go from having nothing to now being in a high position, I'm living on my own, I'm financially stable, that seemed impossible. And to be able to do all of that and be here now is quite incredible, and definitely could not have done it if I didn't have the tools that I had.
Awesome. And you've kind of recapped the whole hangout for us and that little thing. So I'm going to go back just a little bit because obviously it's really easy to look back on who we were, and it's probably really easy to reflect and say, gosh, I can't believe I allowed that, of myself at that time. If only I had known where I would end up. We just talk a little bit about what was okay, so physically we knew what was happening. You had to move back home. You didn't have money. You had to borrow money. You moved into a small space with your family. So those were the physical things that were happening. What was going on internally within you that contributed to your experience of wanting to give up? Like, what did you notice about, the thoughts going on in your mind and kind of the internal conversation? And how did you, what was your approach to dealing with that? Because it is a matter of dealing with finding a job, taking care of the practical reality stuff. But how did you, what was going on inside of yourself, and how did you kind of get a hold of yourself in terms of getting that to stabilize?
Well, for me, I took the long way. And I say that because I definitely could have supported myself more effectively when I look back. I definitely allowed things to bubble and boil inside me longer than was necessary. I definitely used my living situation as an excuse to throw pity parties and just be staying in a depression and hating my job. So within me, definitely a lot of conflict going on where I was judging what I was doing because there were aspects of it that I judged as being dishonest or immoral. It was my own ego, because I wanted to do things my way and I wanted to feel a certain way about the job that I was doing. And I wasn't letting go of my own sense of, I guess you would say, pride in that regard, where I felt like I deserved better because look how bad it is for me right now. So I deserve to feel this way and judge everything and have this attitude. So that was my conflict point, was me not actually being at peace with myself, and as a result, not actually working with what was here. Because have a look, I was fortunate to actually have a place to go to when everything fell apart. I was fortunate that I was able to get into a job understanding that things are in the job market right now. And instead of having a sense of gratefulness and purpose within what I was doing, I definitely allowed a lot of my own feelings of being hurt, or feelings of things not being fair, feelings of being pushed out or disregarded, when really I was just as guilty of regarding others and considering others. And it was definitely a process. So when I say that, yeah, I had this physical situation of, living in this small space with my mother and my sister and all of that. There was also an internal process that I had to go through, and it was interesting to sync up, because the more I worked on myself, the more my work ethic improved, the more the quality of my work improved. And that was what began my gradual climb out of that pit. And that was definitely a process. It did not happen overnight. There were moments where I thought, nothing's changing, what's wrong? Why am I bothering? Why do I keep going to the same job every day? But, looking back after a few months, I was already seeing the difference. I wasn't the same, and things were getting better. And I think that was, it started to click, that this process that I'm walking through for myself, removing my judgments and my hangups about the past, or wanting to get back to what they were because I thought that was better, that allowed me to return to reality where I needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also there's an aspect of, that whole self-responsibility. Like, we forget that this is my reality. Like, it's not just happening to me. I'm not just in debt because it just somehow happened. Like, people just gave me money. It's like I put myself in that situation where I had to borrow money. It's like that aspect of being the creator of my reality. And when we don't see that connection or that responsibility, it's so easy to victimize ourselves. And in that victimization, we don't have to take responsibility. We can just throw our hands up and say, it's not me, something else, take care of this, And that kind of brings me to my next question. I think a lot of times people find themselves in that situation looking for a positive feeling to kind of get them through, like things will just get better, or people will say to other people who are in such a situation, don't worry, things will get better, or just have hope, or just pray, things will be better. From your perspective, why is that not sufficient for actually changing one's situation or reality?
There's a perfect illustration for that. And anybody can test this. And all you have to do is name all of your problems, write them on a piece of paper, and then go out and buy a lot of it and hope that that's going to solve everything. And when you come back and realize you didn't win, that's when you see how ineffective it is to believe that something somehow outside of your power, outside of your directive control or direction, is just going to magically change things for you. And I think that is a tendency we all have. It makes a kind of weird sense that if we could just out for a better shot next time, or if we could just wait because maybe I'll meet the right connection and they're going to give me everything and they're going to get me hooked and set up and I'll be done with this place. So why would I settle? Why would I put in the work here? Because I'm just going to wait for my ride. And they're coming any second. So, and that doesn't work. And I definitely played into that. And that was eventually what led me to realize there is no help coming. And when I was able to let go of hoping and, feeling righteous about, oh, but I deserve better. So, it'll work itself out. The universe is a good guy. I'll get what's coming. When I let go of that and actually got to work on myself, that was when real change happened. And it wasn't an overnight change. There were months and, it felt like a year before I noticed things really changed. And that was because every day things do change. things are different in ways that are so minute that you don't notice day to day. But after a few months of you applying yourself, you do change. You do change. People do notice that, and you will notice that. So yeah, definitely waiting and hoping, and also that sense of feeling powerless and believing that you are powerless. So you'd rather hold out for some miracle because, you know, maybe that seems more likely to you than you having the power to change. That was one of the key points that I needed to face, to realize that the only reason why I'm not moving and not challenging myself, hitting my days, you know, with stride, it was because I believed I was powerless and I was a victim. So it's because of that faulty, I allowed this belief of, well, because I'm so powerless, the logical thing to do is wait for somebody, what? Wait for somebody more powerful than me to take, you know, responsibility for me. And that doesn't work out very well. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. And, you know, when I first found Desteni and started, you know, applying the tools for myself, that was like the one point that really kind of allowed me to realize the power I did have. And that was that point of self-responsibility, that there is nothing in this world outside of me that is going to change my life or come to me and give me what I think I'm looking for. Like, it all was here within my ability. And that really was like such an empowering realization. It was like the minute I heard that, it was just like I held on to that and I just went running. Like, it was so freeing to realize that as messed up as I experience my life to be, I have 100% ability to change it. And it's really about how I live day to day. And, you know, as you're sharing, you kind of really give a cool example of that process of accumulation. You know, it's like one day, one action, one moment, you know, consistently accumulates. And yeah, before you know it, there is a change and you're like, what happened? But here I am, you know?
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, and that kind of goes into my next question, and you touched on it a little bit, but so taking out the positive thinking and the hoping and the praying, you know, what contributes to real change? Like, how were you able to, I mean, you touched on a little bit about the ECAF interviews and stuff like that, but what else did you do to support yourself during that time to kind of gradually get yourself out of the position you're in? I mean, how did you support yourself daily?
Well, like I mentioned, there was an process that went along with the physical process. And I would delineate that by saying the internal process is dealing with the judgment, the stressors that I would notice when I got home from work. And to work through those points, there were interviews that I'd listened to from EQOF and the tool had learned throughout the years working with the Desteni material and having that understanding that I am responsible, I created it, and I can allow creations to define me, or I can take responsibility for what I created and create something else. So with that understanding was the internal process where I'd go home and, for example, I'd have a really bad exchange with my boss where he wanted us to do something that I knew just couldn't be done the way that he wanted. I would get so angry and take it personally. And that would feed my everything, actually. I was going to say that would feed my experience, but it would bleed into the me, where if I didn't resolve that, I would go to sleep angry and I would wake up angry and go to work angry, and a customer might come in, I won't close the sale. And what would I do? I would blame my boss for that, you know, and I would blame my job, and I would blame. And change. So that was why the internal process was so critical for me, because that allowed me to, it's kind of like when your starts acting up and you hit, you know, Control Alt Delete and you freeze everything so you can take a look and, okay, what's going on here? Why? Okay, that doesn't belong there. That's not, stop that. And then you go back and your system's running again. That is the internal process. And because I was doing that, be honest, full disclosure, I could have been a lot more diligent about it. I did let things boil up to a point where finally it clicked that I had to do something. When I did, things would change because I changed. Because instead of holding my boss responsible, I started to change me. And I would, when I have a bad experience, I would say, this is what I can do. And this is what I know can be done. And if that's not good enough, I know I've put everything into it and I'm not holding myself back. And that's enough. I can't more than what I can do. There's no point to get angry or make things personal. So along with that internal process, my physical world began to kind of reflect. Instead of the challenges piling up and me making them bigger, it became more about, okay, what can I prioritize? What needs my time? And now that I have skill set, know what I'm really good at, I can start delegating. Okay, I can do this first, this next, and then this last. And if something goes wrong, I know how to fix it. So it became really practical instead of personal. So that, I think, allowed me to eventually, gradually, again, this took about 3 years to go from the very not having any money, not having a car, not having a place of my own, to now having all of those things, and now going back to school and being able to go back to the life that I thought I lost, which is cool because now I'm a bit wiser and I've been stress tested and I know where my limits are, and I've expanded since then. So overall, I mean, I would say anybody that's facing this point or feeling like the world is unfair or they're just so powerless to realize that you really aren't. I'm pretty lazy about my process. Let me be honest here. If I can crawl out of that and out of those points and be able to recreate, you can too. Okay. Seriously. I took the long way. You guys don't have to do it that way. If you do feel powerless, remember that we do live in a world that is systemically unfair, and that's not personal. It's not your fault, but you're responsible for it. Yeah. So, and that was something that helped me too, is to realize that, yeah, this situation is completely ridiculous, what we have to do just to survive. And it's not our fault. We don't have to feel guilty about it, about what we need to do, but we are responsible for making sure that we are living in a way that is stable, constantly looking at how we can invest in ourselves and each other, so that we can change, starting with ourselves, and then ripple out to change the world. And that can't happen as long as you still believe you're disempowered.
Absolutely. Very cool. And so touching on that point of, working together, did you find, because I can see someone in such a situation would probably really feel like isolating themselves, or just in general feeling like they are isolated. When you hit rock bottom or are stuck between that rock and a hard place, you're alone and there's nobody there. So did you find, that you wanted to isolate, or did you find yourself communicating with other people? Did you find that that supported at that time?
I definitely went through a phase where I hated people, hated every single person. And I deliberately would shun people, and I would wake up and go to work and go home. Party, I didn't make friends, I didn't want friends. And I was actually kind of a rude person, even to my coworkers, because I was still dealing with my internal stuff and I wasn't letting anybody in. And when people would offer help, I would kind of like brush them aside and get offended. Like, I was in such a state of feeling disempowered that I went into spitefulness, even when people were actually around. And I definitely didn't take into consideration. I definitely didn't look at how my behavior may affect them and what they might think of themselves as a result of, my own hang-up. They might take things personally, that could have been avoided. So I definitely did have that point of isolation, feeling like because my world had collapsed, I had no support. And if I have no support, why should I give support? Shouldn't I look out for myself? And I did go into that, a bit of that lone wolf for a while. I'll get it done. I'll do it alone. Don't help me because I'm not giving anything back, and I don't want to feel guilty when I don't support you back, because that's who I am now. So, spoiler alert, that didn't work out. That wasn't a very good or rational decision. Eventually, what assisted me the most was actually, instead of being so closed off, it was to eventually open myself up in terms of the work that I was doing, who I was within it, understanding, yeah, this is messed up, but this is not a personal thing. We're all actually struggling together. As long as I'm pushing people out and not allowing myself to be of service, not allowing myself to be helpful, I'm not furthering the progress towards a solution. I'm actually just kind of stepping back and waiting for things to revolve around me. Now, that is egotistical. It's that, you know, just because you're having a bad time and you feel disempowered, that nobody else matters. So that was one of the later stages of my process within this, was to realize that I had to work with other people. I had to develop conversations and work relationships and show that I could be trusted, that I could be depended on, that, yeah, I may not agree with my job, but I'm gonna do it. And I can lead and I can manage and I will take responsibility, and I do take responsibility. So yeah, isolation is very tempting. I definitely was in. I didn't want help. I didn't want anything. If anything, I wanted to just disappear completely. Again, that was ego, to think that I could, just because things were working out, just blink out of existence and let it sort itself out, right? But things get better when you allow yourself to be in this world but not of it.
Yep.
And be able to work with what is here instead of judge it, and be with yourself instead of, you know, being your own enemy. And you find eventually that you make friends, you make alliances, you make allies, and you're going to need that, because nobody can sort this out alone. I definitely tried, and it's been a much smoother process, allowing myself to open up to myself and to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an important point, what you just said, you know, in terms of that experience we have towards other people and wanting to isolate and hide. It's because we're not dealing with ourselves, and we want to hide from ourselves, and we're angry at ourselves, but we always project it outward. You know, that's part of the whole blame thing. And so, I mean, in terms of a reference to see where we're at, if there's, you know, disharmony with our outside world, it says so much about what's going on inside of us, and that we have some work to do. And, you know, as you mentioned, it takes time and you have to have patience, but it's a process that can be done. You know,
Yes.
Slowly but surely it can be done. I do have a couple comments. I didn't have the Q&A open, so I opened it quick and found we had a few comments. So Anna Brooks Thompson shares, "Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story. It is a very powerful message you share that will be tremendously supportive for anyone facing a similar point of rock bottom in their life. This is what practical self-empowerment is all about."
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then we have Andrea Teal. Andrea Teal, "Thank you for sharing your process, Joe. I'm glad to see you here." And then, so no questions. And then one last comment from Really Vodka Billy. He says, "Hi." Hello, thank you for watching.
Hi there.
Yeah, so that's really cool. So I know you have been talking about your work kind of in relation to this whole point of climbing yourself out of rock bottom, and how initially that was the conflicted experience that you had. How did you see your change of focus about the job, you know, instead of judging it, instead of having, you know, such a kind of negative perspective of it? How did you changing that kind of relationship, how did you see that change physically, like how did your work then change? I mean, you talked a little bit how you're able to move through the company, but I mean, what were some of the things that you noticed that once you started focusing on the solution more than the problem within the work?
Really, if I take the extreme ends of that, it's like day and night. Obviously, in that and between that was a very long process spanning a few years. But to begin with, yeah, at the beginning, I felt very conflicted about how the company would handle certain things, how certain procedures were done. Obviously, within the scope of making profit, right? That's what we're all here to do at the end of the day at our jobs, is to make the money. And when you work for someone else, you have to kind of expect that you're going to be doing work that it's you marginally, but the company at a greater margin or a greater share. And for myself, when I started to look at my place within the bigger picture, to realize that, yeah, I'm seeing all of this and I'm seeing how it lead to harm towards other people because they're not aware of how certain procedures are done at their expense and at all. If they knew that, they definitely wouldn't be our customers. But when I look at the bigger picture and explode that out, right, it's the same with the global economy that we have now. We're participating day to day actively in an illusion. We're participating in this belief that as long as we go and make money and be able to buy our survival, that things are okay. And we've accepted this idea that that is what okay means in this world. That is what living means in this world. So when I started to see how I am, like everyone else, a piece within this big machine, a piece within this giant functioning life support system that we currently have, it was no longer personal. It wasn't about, look what this company is making me do. It wasn't about, look at what I have to do to trick people into getting things done for myself or for an account that I'm handling. Look at what tricks I have to employ to get this task done that I can generate a report of profit for my boss. It became about seeing how instead of making it all personal, we are all together trying to do our best, trying to survive. And within this, we have to forgive ourselves and each other for the roles that we have to play, understanding that's not who we are. This is what we've become as a reflection of what we've been accepting. And of course, this went along with my internal process. So when I changed my mindset and my approach, instead of judging my work, I just became more efficient and understood that this isn't personal. And it was strange because now that I look at it, yeah, because I became more efficient and I was handling more and more and more of those things I didn't want for, and I was doing it in such a way that got attention from supervisors and my boss, I worked my way up. And now I'm in a position where I'm training my staff, I'm hiring my own people, and I'm showing them the steps that I had to take so that they don't have to. And I was able to bring people in to learn new processes we developed together that were based on more efficiency and more honesty. And when I say that, it's also to understand there is no such thing as an honest job in the world. Let's be frank about that. There's no such thing as honesty as long as we have to buy our survival. So within that context, we were more honest. And that was the biggest shift. It was going from judging and feeling like I'm disempowered and seeing my job and the system as an enemy to putting that into, well, this is where we're all at. And if I'm not part of the solution for myself, I'm not part of the solution for anyone else. But now I have the opportunity, the standing, the status to actually do something about it, because now I have some leverage. If I were to quit today, a lot of people would tomorrow. So that shows how interdependent everything is. And as long as you hold on to your principle, and keep going at it every day, accumulating, you will get out of the rut and be able to be in a position or find others of like mind who will work with you and change things. And that was my experience.
That's awesome. And that's really cool because that's like the ultimate point of this process of self-empowerment, realizing that it's not just about empowering ourselves in clearing out the inner mess, but to put ourselves in a position of power within this world to clean up the outer mess. So, you know, to really see that process for yourself unfold internally and externally, and to see how you've been able to put yourself into such a position is so cool. It's such a great example of really why we walk this process, because, you know, destiny is not just about the individual, which it is. I mean, that's where we start, on that individual level, but really it's about, you know, together equally taking care of what we have in this world, and putting ourselves in positions where we're empowered to make a difference and we're empowered to make some changes. And, you know, so that's such an awesome, you know, example to be able to share. So I guess to just, you know, end our hangout, if you have any last words to share with anyone who finds themselves in, you know, the rock and the hard place in between, you know, that stuckness, you know, what would you say to anyone who feels like they just cannot see beyond their current situation?
I would remind anybody that's in that situation now or have been for a long time. I'm sure there are still people who are familiar with the material, or maybe will listen to the interviews, and maybe they haven't introduced themselves to us or participated, but they're kind of in it and participating at a slower rate, but they're going through all these life issues alone and feeling like there is no support, feeling like they can't get out of it. But really, let's break that down. That is a feeling. That is an experience. And if it is an experience, it can be stopped. Take a while because of how long we've stayed in it, but that's not what we really are. And I would stress that point as much as I can here and now, to say equivocally that we are not that experience of powerlessness. We are not that experience of I'm totally alone. Yes, we do have to survive. We have to work what we have access to here, but that doesn't mean that we have to make anything personal or feel guilty about having to see to our survival in an inherently system. Anybody that's judging themselves now because a certain aspect of what they do is not valuable, or they're having to do things that may seem immoral, well, let me ask you about the people who are the elites of this world. Do they have a moral system? They don't. They're going to keep doing what they've been doing. And if we adopt a mentality of morality that says, because I'm doing things that are unfair, I'm a bad person, well, you're really limiting yourself, and you're making yourself the victim in that scenario. Again, it's not to look at what's right or wrong. It's about, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to accept in the cause of changing things for the better? And part of that for now is we do have to work with the system. We do have to participate in jobs. We do have to be in positions that are not supportive, because this is the stage we have to work through. And we're all doing it whether you feel like you're alone or not. The difference is you can choose to work with others. You can choose to open yourself up and receive support from yourself, so that you can receive support from others, and by extension, you eventually can support others. Mm-hmm. And be that point that you thought was missing when you needed help. And I think that is very and worthy of waking up for. Please take the shortcut. I shared with you the long process that took me several years. I did a few chapters. There were definitely some director's cuts that you guys didn't get the benefit of. But please, you know, if you do feel like you go on, it really isn't that you can't change. It's really not that bad. It's just an experience. And the more you stop that from determining how you and judge the world, the more it's going to dissipate. You will see that you can change. you know you can change. Come on, you do know that.
Mm-hmm.
So do it. We're here. I consider Destini my extended family. I've known you guys years, and if it wasn't for the consistent and continuous support of everybody, I definitely would not have pulled myself out, because we have many, many examples of people facing many, many things. I'm just maybe one piece of that. So self-known, get yourself out, and there is a solution, and we're all looking for it together.
Absolutely. Awesome. Wonderful words, Joku. And, you know, like you said, check out the Desteni forums where you can, you know, participate and introduce yourself and share your story. If you're in a situation or a place where you just feel like so internally stuck, share yourself. There is definitely many people there waiting to help and assist and support and share their experiences. So we'll have all the links available to the forum, to DIP Lite. It's a free course that you can take online that kind of gives you this introduction to the process that we're talking about, learning how to, you know, basically move through the thoughts and the feelings and the reactions and the emotions that are coming up. So we'll have all the links in the YouTube description for you to check out. Definitely, as Joku said, don't stay silent. You know, speak up, share yourself, make yourself known, because, you know, Desteni is about creating a group. And, you know, the more people, the more powerful we become individually and collectively. And then we have just one last comment from Marlene, and we'll end it there. She says, Marlene says, thanks, Joe, for sharing your story and for explaining how to not take each other's role personally, as well as the point of honest jobs, and so rather working with what is here instead of fighting against it. That's living wisdom. Absolutely. All right, so I think that we'll call it a hangout. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on and sharing your story. It was definitely a pleasure to have you here and to speak to you and have you share your story.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Desteni Movie Night will be back tomorrow. Friday is tomorrow, yes. I'm not sure what movie they're watching, but Telemon will be on, and next week Anna will be back with another installment of the Practical Self-Empowerment series. Thanks, you guys, for watching. We'll see you next time.